When Oppo was designing the Oppo A5 Pro, they made some very distinct choices, which makes this a really interesting phone, although not a phone for everyone. Let's get into the review. So what do I mean by choices? Well, design is one of the areas where Oppo's made some really serious choices. The Oppo A5 Pro is built around a 6.67-inch, 1604 by 720 pixel, 120Hz capable LCD. And look, while 120Hz is nice to see in this price range, it's not exactly unexpected. 720p on a phone that costs $399 Australian though, that's a little bit more surprising because I really would expect 1080p at this time at that price. There's a reason for this though. And the reason is because, well, to put this in role-playing game terms, if this was a role-playing game character, Oppo's put all its points into armor class, basically. This is a ruggedized phone. So it's IP69 rated. It's also mil-spec rated for shock and drop resistance. It's a tough phone, or it should be a tough phone. I've got a whole video about why an awful lot of the roughness and toughness tests that people do on phones are not that great. And to be clear, while I have water tested this, look, here you go, splash. And it survives, obviously. While I have done that, I've not gone to the full extent of crushing one under my heel. For a start, this is a loaner phone from Oppo. That gets it reviewed, nothing else. They have no editorial oversight. But I've got to return it. I can't return it in pieces. But also, I've got a full video on why an awful lot of those tests you see online really aren't all that worthwhile. They're destruction porn and not much else, but I digress. The point of this phone is that it's really quite rugged, even though the screen is only kind of so-so. Also, as a reminder, and again, I've got another video on this, water resistance is not the same thing as waterproof. Leave this underwater for long enough and it will die eventually. Water resistance wears out over time. Its rugged nature does mean that you could potentially skip out on a phone case. In fact, for the model sold in Australia, while it has a cardboard sleeve that suggests that there could have been a phone case in there, there isn't. Oppo used to supply those as standard, but you just don't get one here. Here in Australia, Oppo sells the Oppo A5 Pro in two distinct color tones. So there's olive green or mocha brown, which is what I've got. You really don't see too many brown phones. It's an unusual choice. Not an entirely unwelcome one. It actually presents more like a kind of dark grey. Some people will actually quite like it, I think. Some people will view it as quite stylish. It's not entirely to my taste. By the look of it, there may also be blue and pink models in some international markets, but not here in Australia. At the rear, it's only got the most minor of camera bumps, which means it doesn't quite sit flat on a desk, but it's close enough, just a little bit of rocking involved. In terms of controls, you get a standard volume rocker above a combination assistant and power button, which is also the fingerprint reader. That's a fairly standard kind of combination. While on the left-hand side, there's a dual SIM card tray, which is also micro SD card expansion capable, although it's only a dual tray, not the triple tray type, where you can do micro SD plus 2 SIMs. Although you can also add an eSIM to this phone, and the Australian model is NFC capable for your contactless payments. All so far, so good, and Oppo appears to have made some balanced choices here, some that I didn't like with the screen, some that I do like with the ruggedness. But what about an area where Oppo is usually quite strong, the camera? So to look at the back of the Oppo A5 Pro, you might think, well, oh, two big ring lenses there. That must mean it's a really good camera phone. Well, no. And again, I think this comes down to building to a cost and putting so much of an emphasis on the ruggedness of the phone, because while this looks like it's a dual camera phone, it's actually only a single camera phone. So it's a single wide 50 megapixel sensor paired up with a 2 megapixel monochrome sensor. And that doesn't mean that you're taking moody noir photos with it. It's actually just to do with being a focusing lens. At the front, there's an 8 megapixel selfie sensor. And, well, for $399, that just ain't much. I mean, you don't have to push up much to get something like the CMF Phone 2 Pro, for example, which is a triple lens array on the back of it. Relative to the price of this thing, it's not a comparison that favours the Oppo A5 Pro. Pro on a phone also usually means that it's a camera-specific phone, but it's really not the case here. And to be honest with you, I really struggled a lot more with this phone, even in regular kind of daylight situations, with a fair degree of overexposure, some typical issues with low light, and of course a lack of zoom. I'll quickly show you what the zoom looks like here, because it is just digital zoom. So here's the famous Sydney Opera House, just taken with the standard wide lens. An ultra wide here, of course, would have been really nice to get a much more dramatic shot, but it's not to be. And then the 2x zoom, which Okay, works well enough, doesn't get terribly close. Now, you can push that all the way up to 10 times zoom, but you really shouldn't. The results are predictably quite poor. This is far from the worst camera phone that I've tested, but with that $399 price point in mind, yeah, I was just left disappointed. This doesn't really shoot as well as I would like, even at this price point. Now, again, there's a balancing act at play here. Maybe that ruggedness is enough for you and you don't care so much about camera, and if so, that's fine. But if you do, you can do so much better at this price point. What about performance, though? Behind that rugged frame, Oppo packs in a MediaTek Dimensity 6300 processor, 8GB of RAM, and a rather pleasing 256GB of onboard storage. I do like having high storage on my phones, and of course the fact that you can bump that up with microSD makes it even better. The storage is the best part of this phone's internals. However, the rest of it, yeah, maybe not so much. So to give it a comparative picture, I ran Geekbench 6's CPU test over it just to see how that CPU compares against other phones that at the time of producing this video could be had for around the same kind of price. Here's how the A5 Pro compared. That is not a good look for the A5 Pro, I'm going to say. It is notably slower than most of its competitors, and that's not a good thing when you want performance. And unfortunately, it's much the same story when we switch to GPU performance. Here's how it compares using 3D Mark. All of this is not to say that this is a massively slow phone, but it definitely underperforms relative to its price point. And that did irritate me. This is just a bit slower in loading apps, and in some applications, games obviously, certain features may not be available to you. It's just a bit slow and kludgy. The Oppo A5 Pro runs on Android 15 with Oppo's own ColorOS launcher on top of it. And ColorOS is still an acquired taste. Some people love it, some people don't. I am on the fence and leaning towards not liking it because I do like a more basic Android look, but I can appreciate that Android can be all things for all people. That's good. Equally good is the fact that Oppo is promising 6 years of security updates and 5 years of OS upgrades for this phone, which is great to see in a $399 phone. What's less great to see are all of the additional apps that Oppo throws onto this phone, because you get not just Oppo's in-house apps and its app market if you want an alternative app store, but also things like, rather predictably, the Booking.com app, because that thing infests every Android phone, Temu, TikTok, Facebook, AliExpress, LinkedIn, WPS Office, and a range of low-budget Android games that I'm pretty sure very, very few people want, but obviously money changed hands and that's why they're there. You can uninstall them, but I really wish that they just weren't there in the first place. You might want some of these apps, of course, but I seriously doubt that everyone wants all of them. So far, it's not looking great for the Oppo A5 Pro. I'm not quite believing that Pro designation. But Oppo had one other choice to make, and that was with the battery. And here it opted for a 5,800 milliamp hour battery, a little bit higher than that typical 5,000 milliamp hour battery that I find in most Android phones. And of course, battery capacity is one thing, battery life is another. And to give that some comparative weighting, I ran it through my standard YouTube battery test. I've got a whole video about battery tests and their limitations. Please go watch that at your leisure. But here's how the Oppo A5 Pro compared using that test against that same crop of phones. The Oppo A5 Pro absolutely blitzes the field here, though I should note that with a 720p display, it's not quite crunching the same number of pixels as its competitors. That undeniably is going to help its overall battery life. Still, this is a good long life battery phone, and in day-to-day usage, that does stand up all day, easy unless you're hammering it. The Oppo A5 Pro supports Oppo's fast SuperVOOC charging at up to 45 watts. SuperVOOC is its own standard, doesn't sometimes play well with others, and with that in mind, Oppo has often included a charger in the box, but at least for the Australian retail model, that's not the case. You will have to supply your own charger. I have noticed some of my higher capacity chargers do fire up a screen that suggests that it's doing VOOC charging. It's not, but you'll still have to bring your own charger no matter what. So should you buy the Oppo A5 Pro? Well, look, the reasons why you might are twofold, fundamentally. The battery life really is rather good, and it is a rugged phone. So if you have to live or work in an environment which is hazardous to phones, then yes, this could be a good budget buy. Or if you're just clumsy and accidental a lot of the time, and phones just seem to keep breaking and dying around you, then again, possibly that has merit. I feel like that's a bit of a niche case. I think for the broader consumer market, this is not the right phone to buy, because while that battery life is fundamental to having a smartphone experience, a dead battery is a dead battery, the rest of the compromises you've got to put up with, the slow app performance, the mediocre camera, I just feel they're not worth it compared to what you can get out of a $399 phone. If this phone was considerably cheaper, and obviously over time that's likely to happen, then it becomes a much more compelling prospect. But at $399, this one feels like a niche buy for a very small subset of buyers. Anyway, that's my take on the Oppo A5 Pro. Got any thoughts? Hit me up in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.